with our interviews as we go forward, and I think we're going to actually welcome in a prominent person at the City University of New York. Jay Hershenson is the Senior Vice President for Public Affairs, I believe, and pretty much everyone knows Jay when it comes to issues dealing with college education, and definitely with CUNY. And Jay, it's great to have you back on with City and State TV, and tell us a little bit why Caucus Weekend is important, especially for CUNY.
We've had a wonderful day because the City University of New York does an annual luncheon program. It's educational in nature, and it is the most attractive of all the luncheons that you could imagine. We had the Attorney General spoke, and the State Controller spoke, and the Public Advocate spoke, and the City Controller spoke, and the heads of the conference itself, Speaker Pro Temp Jeff Aubrey, and the conference chair, Crystal Peoples-Stokes. We had a tremendous turnout of legislators, and they were there to really commune with students, with faculty, with alumni of the City University of New York. Many of them are interns, what we call Caucus Scholars, Ernesto Malave Leadership Academy recipients, Citizenship Now volunteers, University Student Senate, and they all got together to help honor two major award recipients that the Chancellor of CUNY, James B. Milliken, was planning to recognize and acknowledge in a very special way. So it's been an amazing day thus far, and the positive energy is nothing short of infectious.
That's great. I mean, one of the main purposes of this conference is to provide scholarship money for many kids. I know you bring a lot of your students from CUNY up here. If people are walking, this is a massive area from the concourse over to the LOB, and if you're asking directions from someone or getting directions from someone where to go, it's usually a CUNY student, right?
I think that's very true, but I do want to point out how proud we are of our students.
Yeah.
Our students are not born, by and large, into wealthy circumstances where internships are available at a very early age. It takes institutions like the City University of New York, through its 24 colleges and professional schools, to provide those opportunities regardless of your income. And when you enter CUNY, in addition to the classwork and the fabulous professors that we have, you want to take advantage of opportunities to learn about government through internships and fellowships, to learn about public service. And so we provide a framework. Many of the students who participated in today's luncheon, it's their first opportunity to see what it's like to be at a caucus conference, to go to workshops, to go to seminars, but also to be part of this larger CUNY community where higher education is so important. I do want to point out that the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, came to the luncheon, and he made an announcement with respect to his higher education goals and objectives, and he put a lot of important issues on the table, including the funding of opportunity programs at CUNY and SUNY, programs of financial assistance, childcare, other types of programs and services designed to help students complete and graduate, and to do so in successful ways. So that was very exciting to have the Speaker of the Assembly, the first African American to be elected to that position, come to the luncheon and pay his respects. He is a graduate of Baruch College, MBA in finance, so he accomplished a great deal, and the students and the faculty and staff really appreciated that. It really was a packed event, and I think that the students leaving the luncheon, many of them now have more of an understanding of why public service can be exciting. It can be inspiring if you're going to look to achieve on behalf of your constituents. And that was the message.
You've been around for a few years in terms of attending these conferences, putting them together, initiating them. Some of them are never been done before. You've taken some bold steps in dealing not only with the students throughout the CUNY system, but also showing them what the legislative process in the Senate, the mock senates that you do, and all of that. So it's been decades really that you've. And so, I ask you, from the perspective that you have as a person that's under any circumstance, whoever is leader, whether it's Republican, Democrats, you appeal to both. It's on behalf of the education of the entire state with a focus on the city. How does this make a difference? Having a person, for example, as you described, Carl Hastie, from the Bronx, a Bronx native who went through the system, who has a master's from Baruch, how does that make the job easier or better for the possibilities of getting the proper funding for the City University of New York and for CUNY? How does that relate? Because there's some realities. People say, well, what's going to be a difference? But this guy's speaker now, very powerful position. So in practical terms, from your perspective, and you've dealt with all of them, good, bad, mediocre, excellent ones. I'm not going to ask you to name them. I know some of them. But how does that make a difference? How does that make the job more effective?
It's a very insightful question. I do want to point out that our first award recipient many, many years ago was Gerson Barrero, who we
and
honored.
In spite of that, they continue to do well.
And it is important to not only honor, but also to recognize outstanding individuals who have contributed so much, like yourself. And I say that unabashedly, and that's simply the case. And there's a selfish reason for it, because I'm a believer in creative actualization, which basically means that those young people who hear you speak say to themselves, I could do that. Maybe someday if I took certain steps, I could be up there too. Very, very important. Over the years, as we have built a program with the Caucus Conference, everything from internships to district office opportunities, and we've done the same thing with Somos Futuro, regardless, as you say, of who's governor or who is in what office. I look for the emotional connection between elected officials and the students we're trying to serve. Now, that's easiest to find sometimes if the elected official is an alum and if they've attended either as an undergraduate or graduate. If that's not the case, then I look to see if there's someone in their family, mother, father, sister, brother, cousin, niece, nephew, who's attended a CUNY college. And if that's not possible, then I look to see if there's someone in their orbit who's taught at the City University of New York or who has benefited in some way. I always look for the emotional connection, because without that emotional connection, a place like CUNY is distant. You know, CUNY is a place where students hail from over 205 countries. It's a very diverse place. The cultures are literally from around the world. And so to connect with us, we always want to get a sense of how best to make that connection. And my own view is that an emotional one is the case. Many times I will meet people who will say to me, I went to Harvard or I went to MIT. My father went to City. You know, my mother went to Hunter. And I could not have attended those institutions if it were not for them. And my response is that CUNY creates options for the sons and daughters of alum, not just for people themselves who are attending the university. And I always look for that. And I keep looking, and sometimes I have to look deep, but most of the time I'll find it. Because if I don't, then I'll find someone close to that person who can relate their experience and why it's so important for funding to be made available.
Yep. I
said at the end of the luncheon, today is Valentine's Day, and the theme should be, show some love, invest in CUNY. Mm-hmm. That's where we stand.
And that's a message that Carl Hasty took back.
Yeah.
Carl Hasty was dynamic, and he utilized his appearance to, in very, very important ways, state his goals and objectives. And I really commend him for that. He didn't just do a general message of support. He and I talked about 2.5 weeks ago, before the speaker's election, about his experiences at Baruch. And he was naming professors that had an impact on him. It was an indication that hope is on the way with respect to this new speaker.
That's great. Well, Jay Hershenson, Senior Vice President at CUNY, thank you very much for joining us, and it's always a pleasure.